So we can officially start this masterclass. Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for being here to listen to another masterclass in a series of masterclasses we've been listening to in the previous and this week. Today we are going to talk about digital workplaces, which has been one of the most important topics in the past 2 years since the COVID situation. We still have a lot of questions and there's still a lot of challenges when it comes to creating the perfect digital environment for employees. So this masterclass might be a perfect opportunity for you to deepen your knowledge and to hear more on this. Our today's guest and speaker is, as you know, Leslie Zamosi, an MBA director at City College, University of York. Leslie might be familiar to most of you because he was our speaker this year at HR Week. So if you enjoyed his expert talk, I'm sure you're going to enjoy this masterclass. Leslie, thank you for being here with us today and welcome to this session.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. If you feel ready, you can start your presentation and this masterclass. We're eager to hear your thoughts on the topic. So whenever you're ready, just turn on your screen sharing so that we can see your presentation and we can start.
Super, great. Thank you very much.
Presentation is ready. Good luck.
Thanks so much. First of all, thank you very much to all of you for taking the time to be with us here today and with me. It's a pleasure to talk to you a little bit about managing and engaging remote workers, a topic that has taken on a variety of new opportunities and a variety of new challenges for us over the last year and a half or so. But having said that, this whole issue about engaging and working with remote workers has actually been around for the better part of 30 years. This whole issue of remote work and virtual work and everything else is nothing new. Certainly the context and the scope, though, is what's new. So we'll sort of be looking at sort of both sides of the coin, as we will, as we go through the discussion. Let me just give you a quick background about myself. As Alexandra mentioned, I am the director of the MBA program at the University of York, Europe Campus City College. I've been working in this region of the world for since nearly 2000, so just over 20 years. I've got a PhD in organizational behavior and human resource management from the University of Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. I spent 5 years, excuse me, in the biomedical sector, marketing manager, and I've been just about, I hate to say this now, a quarter century. It doesn't sound so good when I do it, say it myself. In the areas of change management, both in the public and private sectors. Working with a number of companies throughout this region, but as well as globally. Most recently, I was up in Belgrade with company Kodar, doing a presentation with their board of directors, but as well as companies in the telecom sector, A1, TELUS, and then some other organizations as well. As I always like to say, I always see these presentations as a beginning of some type of dialogue. So after we're done, if there are any other questions or issues or you want to engage in some way, please feel free to email me, or we can join through LinkedIn or whoever you'd like to connect. The first thing I want to just say, and this is a rule that I use in a lot of different situations, when it comes to managing remote workers, the worst thing we can do is to assume that we know how to manage remote workers. Remote workers are different. Remote workers have a different way of approaching things, a different way of looking at things, and so on. The assumption that somehow we know how to manage them, or it's similar to the way that we manage regular workers, I think is a misnomer. Because the bottom line is, when you assume that you know how to manage remote workers, you basically make an ass out of you and me. Don't assume anything when it comes to remote workers. Don't assume that they're going to be more engageable. Don't assume that there'll be greater levels of transparency and so on. Having said that, there are some things that we do know about remote workers, which we're going to share with you through the presentation. First of all, some of the things I want to touch on today with you. Basically, how do we get here and what do we know at this point in time? I also want to look at what we know today about managing remote workers, what we knew about, what we know about managing remote workers in general, and as well follow up with some best practices that we found during some research that we did just over 2 months ago with around 30 middle and senior managers from across the region in terms of managing remote workers and not some tricks. I don't like tricks and I don't like life hacks and stuff like that. Effective tools that we can use to help in that regard. First thing I want to just touch on is how do we get here and what do we know? As I mentioned before, the notion of remote work has been with us for a very long time. And in my opinion, a lot of organizations simply resisted this changeover. But things were slowly picking up. We've seen it in the high-tech sector. We've seen it in some IT companies and so on. But there was still this stigma associated with remote work. You know, if you go back to March 3rd, 2020, okay, we don't even have to go into mid-March, just March 3rd or so. And, you know, I was talking to companies about remote work and the opportunities for remote work and so on. And the answer was, no, we're not going to do it. These people are going to go home. They're not going to do anything. They're going to sit. They're going to watch YouTube. They're going to, basically, work is going to go down. Even though we already knew from the past 30 years that when people are given the opportunity to work at home, they're actually more engaged. So the March 3rd, the answer is no. End of March, and we're literally shoveling people out the door to put them at home. And organizations are saying, what the hell did we just do? Okay, we had them here, and now they're not here. And literally, is this what's going to happen now? We basically just have to let them go home, sit. They're not going to do anything. They're going to lounge around in their underwear. They're going to watch hours and hours of YouTube. And then eventually we'll get them back into the office. Didn't exactly happen that way, because what we know when workers first went home, when they first went remote, was that there were some impacts on our organization. 5 things in particular. These are what we call our dependent variables. When we really look at organizational behavior and the way we manage people, there are basically 5 things that we try to impact: productivity, job satisfaction, absenteeism, turnover, and loyalty. All in the literature, we know that as organizational citizenship behavior. So what happened when we sent people home to work? Well, this dependent variable called productivity. Well, actually, people's productivity went up when we first sent them home. Their overall areas or their overall perspective in terms of job satisfaction, life satisfaction went up. Absenteeism stayed neutral. Well, actually, not even neutral. It went down. Why? Because you can't be absent when you're at home. You're basically already at home. So absenteeism went down. Turnover, the movement of people out of our organizations, went down. And organizational citizenship behavior, loyalty, went up. So we threw people out the door, and we have this positive impact on our organizations. Now, don't get me wrong. There were a lot of negative impacts on our organizations. But I just want to look at the people management aspect of things. Yes, I know sales got hurt in some industries. Yes, I know that there was chaos and complexity. Yes, I know there was this us versus them approach, the people that we were able to send home and the people that we had to keep in the office in order to keep the operations running. But from the 5 dependent variables, from the 5 things that we were trying to impact, all of these were positive, okay? From an OB HR point of view. At the beginning, I want to emphasize. So what was basically happening at this point is people felt their organization trusted them. They gave them the opportunity to reschedule their own work. A lot of the things that we wished would have happened inside our workplace, we were able to take care of at home. Autonomy, the opportunity to be self-directed. Mastery, the opportunity to get better and better at our work, given that we're working in an online environment. If you think about it, we never even had the chance to teach people or train and develop people in how to work in an online environment. They figured it out themselves. That's what we call mastery. And purpose, or people saw a different purpose in what they were doing. They saw how it fit into a bigger picture. These are the three aspects that we say are the cornerstones of motivation. So that's what happened when people first went home. What happened about a year after? Well, things changed, things shifted. Productivity, that thing that had gone up, was starting to go down. Job satisfaction, life satisfaction was going down. Absenteeism, well, went to a neutral spot. Again, people can't be absent from home. Turnover stayed about the same, but today we are actually predicting a massive increase in turnover in organizations. Current data out of the US suggests that over 50% of employees are ready to leave their organizations, one of the highest numbers we've ever seen since it's been recorded. And our overall loyalty towards organizations, the data suggests, has dropped. And of course, this has an impact on turnover. And the question is, what the heck happened? People went home, they were more motivated, autonomy, mastery, purpose. Organizations started putting restrictions on people. Organizations started putting rules in place. For example, you must be at your computer between this time and that time. If we Skype you, if we somehow connect with you, you have to be there. We started constricting the autonomy, the mastery, and the purpose. It started demotivating people. What do we know then? Remote workers are a different breed of people. They look at things in a different way. Now, as we push forward, as we come to where we are today, here's what we know what workers want today in terms of remote work. About 40% of workers who are in virtual work environments have said, I want to now going forward a combination of remote and face-to-face work. I like this remote thing, but I also like this thing about going back to the office. About 30% say, I want remote work only. I found my holy grail. This opportunity to be self-directed, to be self-fulfilled in terms of what I do. And in fact, I don't even think I want to do it in this country anymore. I want to move to another country or work for remote work is different. And then finally, there are about 30% that say, I need the hell away from my house. Okay, lock me back up at work. Get me back with like-minded people. I don't want to be in this type of work environment anymore. So basically, going forward, if you look at the numbers, about 70% of our virtual employees are indicating that at least they want some form of remote work going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in trouble. This whole hybrid system, this whole movement is changing the fundamentals of how we manage people, of what people are looking for from their organizations and so on. In talking with people at the board of directors level, I've basically said we've opened Pandora's box now. Pandora's box is open. This year and a half is equivalent to, I would argue, about 25 to 30 years in the future, where we were going to get to, except it got squished into this very, very short period of time. And now what we have to do is we have to unlock and re-understand how we manage remote workers. And as I said, we've known this for about 30 years. Okay? The issue, though, is how do we work with the hybrid workers? How do we get this balancing act? And what do I do with the 30% of my employees who say, I only want to work from home? I only want to work remotely. Challenges all over the place as we go forward. So what do we basically know about managing remote workers? Okay. Basically, let's start with something called organizational resistance to change. As I said, we've known for the longest time that people want to work from home. A certain proportion of people are looking for it, or they wanted some mixture of it. We know we should have been doing it, but we didn't. Basically, what was happening was there was a series of forces that were holding the status quo. But the driving forces, in this case, the pandemic, have moved us to this new reality, this new state to where we are today. And the question is, are we going to move back to the status quo? Excuse me. Is that where we're going to go? Or are we going to somehow have to live within this new state? I already used the terms autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Okay? These are basically the three elements of modern motivation, put forward by a variety of different authors, including Daniel Pink, who basically said, look, these are the three things that motivate us. Autonomy. When we want to be accountable, we want to have control of our task, our time, our technique, our team, and so on. In a remote work environment, assume, ask out of you and me, assuming that the organization doesn't put rules and control systems on us and so on, we get that. We get the autonomy. We work in such a way. It is not that we simply sit on our bums and watch YouTube and do all the social media things. We have the cleanest toilet on the planet. Having said that, research has shown that our toilets have never been cleaner during this whole virtual work environment, but that's a different story. Mastery has to do with learning goals. We learn in a different way. We become self-directed in terms of our learning. We become masters of the things that are important to us in that remote work environment. And then purpose. We pursue goals, KPIs, and so on in a different way. So what did we know about how to support people prior to this pandemic? Well, here's what we know from the research that we've conducted with my colleague Alex Sikrios and some other researchers. We wanted these particular behaviors put forward. And sorry, let me just mention the overheads that I'm showing here. I'll provide over to the HR Association, or you can contact me directly if you'd like a copy of them. I'm more than happy to provide those to you. We wanted our managers, our company, to maintain standards of performance. And look at this one, this second one here. Provide direction and then let me work independently. That's what remote work does. It says, go and do this. There's something called the results-oriented work environment. The results-oriented work environment allows for that. Tells me what I need to do and then lets me do it. We also know this from our research with millennials. Millennials have said, give me direction, tell me what to do, just don't tell me how to do my job. Treat me with respect and dignity, allow me to rearrange my job schedule. Remote work allows that, okay? Delegates authority, allows me to carry out my responsibilities, make sure my opinion is heard, is supportive of the decisions I make. These types of things work, the majority of these things work very nicely inside a remote work environment with virtual workers. Some other what we call key supportive managerial behaviors. Encourage me to develop my skills, my knowledge, my experience. Give me challenging jobs, informal information, recognition, feedback, face-to-face discussions, share information with me. These are what we know people wanted in that traditional online type of environment. So we knew that, okay? That's what we knew. And for the vast majority of us, remote work was not an option. Maybe for some of us, hybrid work was an option at best. So how can we be successful? How can remote management be successful going forward? What do we need to do? Well, here what I want to do is simply focus in on these top three. You got to have top sponsorship. When the top of the organization truly buys in, and gives people the opportunity to be remote workers and is not going to hold it against people, then you have the beginnings. You don't have it, but you got the beginnings. You've got to treat people fairly, meaning the opportunity, not equally. I always want to differentiate between equal and fairly in terms of this. And you got to involve employees. You know, HR keeps using the term engagement. Okay. In this case, the engagement of workers going forward in terms of the remote work environment, in terms of the things that they're looking for and the things that we can provide in that way. What are some of the things that stop change as we go into remote work environment? One of these things has to do with what we call the functional boundaries, okay? Meaning the boundaries between departments. It's got to be, we use the term fairly before. Well, it's also got to be done in such a way that we can put in the correct digital tools and techniques in order for this to occur. But you also notice here this third one, the one that gives us that opportunity for change management skills. This is a different skill set in how you manage remote workers. We need to retool our skill set in terms of managing remote workers. What we know from research is that when you look at remote work, there's a gap between the strategic side from the managerial side and the employee side from the operational side. So it's these two things and this gap in between these two areas that we have to be careful of in the remote work environment. But what we do know is that the more we support our remote workers, the smaller the gap becomes. The more we don't support our remote workers, the bigger the gap becomes between those who are inside and outside the organization. So from a managerial perspective, we have to learn how to support people in the online environment. It is a different skill set. We don't do it, the change is going to be difficult / impossible. You're going to get resistance to change. You're going to have higher levels of turnover. And that is my belief in terms of why we see such large potential turnover numbers coming out of the US. Now, as I said, in the US, we're looking at around 50% who have said, I'm ready to leave. I'm ready to turn over my organization. Whether those numbers are similar in this region or not, my gut instinct says they're not exactly 50%, but from the people that I've been talking to in the initial research we've done, you're looking, I think, around 30 to 40%. And these are not your normal turnover people. These are what we call our high performance employees, our hypos. So let's see if we can shed some light on remote work and an overview of best practices that we found. First of all, let me just point out that it falls into 5 different categories. It has to do with employee and trust, engagement, and accountability. It has to do with the equipment of remote workers. It has to do with the reward systems and the transparency of those. It has to do with data protection issues related to remote workers. This is one area where, as I said, remote work's been around for over 30 years. This is the one area where it's become more critical, though, is in terms of data protection. When we first did remote work over 20, 25 years ago, this whole issue of data protection was important, but it wasn't as critical as it is today. There's so many more areas here. And finally, creating a healthy remote work climate, not only in the remote work environment, but as well from inside the organizational system. What I want to do is just talk about these briefly through sort of in a step-by-step approach. First of all, in terms of the trust, engagement, and accountability, identifying and providing and really coming forward and giving people trust who are working in that remote work environment, confidence that they do the right things where they are. I go back and I say, go back to what we said before, the fact that productivity went up initially. A lot of it was because we showed people trust. Now, don't get me wrong. We were forced to do it. Organizations were basically forced to put people into that remote work environment. But it showed a level of trust, okay? It showed that level of trust. And people, when you give them trust, they return that trust back to you. Another important area, focus on output, not processes. This was critical. When we sent people home, people knew what they had to do, okay? And in fact, they changed their processes. They found more effective ways of doing things. Let's also remember from an organizational perspective, our whole ramp up towards digitalization got pushed forward as well. So we were rethinking the processes, they were rethinking the outputs, and they gave us those outputs. They had control over their task, their talent, and how they were going to do things, and they rewarded us with what they gave back. Setting team goals and sharing information, creating a common purpose. Remember, autonomy, mastery, purpose, that motivation aspect of things. The purpose aspect is the same as in a traditional office setting. The difference is we develop the purpose ourselves. It's almost to a point where we're almost like independent workers when we're remote workers. In fact, in dealing with a number of companies right now, we're starting to talk to them about their opportunity to actually turn remote workers into consultants, basically, their own little businesses. Give them the opportunity to do these things. And again, there are opportunities to turn fixed costs into variable costs. And this is where the finance people start applauding on the side. Get rid of the fixed costs, create variable costs, create a more motivated work environment, get higher outcome, higher outputs. There's a trail of positives here. Encourage the innovation aspect of things. As I said, we started rethinking our task, our talents, our skills, and giving back. We had the average worker was starting to push towards a high pose type of activities, a high performance or high potential employees. It's a great opportunity to foster that development inside them. Finally, in terms of sharing new forms of success and protect for potential failures. The need of employees to feel a greater sense of success. Look at this data that comes from Gartner research. The employees' desire for being recognized for their contribution increased by about 30%. Why is this? Because when we're at a distance, if we're in an office environment, let me start there. If we're in an office environment and I'm successful, you can knock on my door and tell me, way to go, good success. When I'm in a remote environment, I can be successful and I don't hear from anybody. So that need for stroking an ego, for just being recognized for what it is, increases. So there are a lot of different things where we can highlight the value of remote workers. Due to this distance, success requires the appropriate recognition that comes along with it. The rules of engagement. What do we have in terms of rules of engagement? Do we have virtual coffee chats, remote office hours, set expectations, daily calls with remote workers? These are all ways that we can engage, we can have accountability, but you've got to be careful that you don't put rules and regulations where you restrict them, where they say, oh, damn, got to be here, I've got to be on the computer between 10 and 11 o'clock in case my manager calls. It's like basically clocking in and clocking out. We don't like clocking in and clocking out. Having said that, yes, I know from a managerial perspective that you want to ensure that somebody's there when you need them, okay? And if they're in the office, I can see them. I can see that they're there. You know what? Give people some trust. Show the love. Show all of these great things that we talk about when it comes to engaging with workers. Give them those opportunities. Give them, now, having said that, sometimes checking in at certain times helps overcome some of the isolation and stress. We're going to talk about the mental health of remote workers in a moment. So there are things that we can do to try and help from that perspective. Use objectives to create clarity. Create those specific outputs that we're looking for. And it's also a new opportunity to monitor the relationships between ourselves as managers and direct reports. We talk about the traditional 360s and these ways of the balanced scorecard approach and so on. One of the surveys that I like is something called the pulse check survey, where we collect data in real time every now and then to create an overall perspective to find out where our remote workers are, where are our managers, or how are managers doing in relation to that, providing the opportunity to share accomplishments that have happened within the team, within the department, with those team members, and so on. Second area is what we call the equipment related to remote workers. Technology, everything from the technology that we're using to our work environment. Okay? Let's remember here, organizations have saved significantly while people have been remote. In a lot of situations, people were using their own computers, their own microphones, their own office, their own desk, their own chair, their own electricity, their own internet, in fact, upgrading their internet. And organizations are saying, well, geez, you know what? That's a good way to reduce those variable costs. In fact, maybe I'll reduce the variable cost of my office space as well. So from an organizational perspective, if people are fixed costs, i.e. our workers, we should consider issues around costs related to heating and lighting, broadband, IT support, replacement of equipment, and so on, or upgrading equipment to ensure that those remote workers have all of the tools that they need, because it does have an impact on their connection and their engagement with the organization. I know a number of organizations have been sending boxes of treats and goodies to employees, and then saying, everybody at 3 o'clock on Tuesday, everybody's on screen and you have your cameras going, and we'll open up the box and we'll have wine and cheese together and so on. Very nice, but what workers are telling us anyway is, give me the cheese and the wine, and then just please don't make me engage that way. It's an awkward force type of thing. But we do have tools and techniques where we can create that transparency, can create that close to face-to-face environment that we're looking for. Transparent reward systems. Some issues here related to clarity in terms of office-based staff versus remote workers, in terms of development, promotion activities, and so on. This is a challenge that is now starting to raise its head in terms of remote workers. We talk about promotions and we say, okay, what are the rules now for promotion? Okay, I've decided that I want to stay at home and work. What do I do to get promoted? Can I be a remote manager with face-to-face workers in the office, for example? Some clarities around benefits, insurance, tax. For example, Google, about 4 or 5 months ago, said, we're going to give you remote workers clarity. We're not going to pay you as much if you decide that you want to maintain a remote work environment. Basically, what you're saying is, you could be getting a New York salary, but working in a non-New York environment. And we were paying you because it was New York. So you're starting to see these compensation issues. But so transparency is absolutely critical here. When we start our organizations, excuse me, start to look at remote workers, digital nomads, and so on, and using those as a type of replacement worker. Again, it's about transparency of reward systems. It's about equality and fairness in terms of what we are doing. Training and data issues around data protection and the training and coaching of remote workers on data protection issues, obligations under those, situations where they might be at risk because of the access to data that they have, and so on. And here, engagement comes through continual reminders about security, home security, confidential information, passwords, digital shredding, all of those types of things. There have been some situations in countries where if I know the home, for example, where a remote worker is, and I want to get competitive information, I can go to their recycling bin and pick up information that they've printed and find out maybe some critical information. So there's some real issues around data protection and remote workers, given this new reality, given this digital aspect that's come along. Final area that I want to talk about here, again, in terms of what we know, has to do with creating a healthy remote work climate. How do we reinforce our organizational values? What's important to us? Working with an organization up in Ukraine where they had brought on 3,000 new workers during the pandemic, 3,000 new workers, and not one of them had stepped into the organization. Not one of them. They were onboarded in a complete remote work environment. How do you reinforce those organizational values about health and safety, welfare, even when they're in a home environment? Issues around the working time and length of work that people are doing. What we know is that remote workers actually work longer hours. I was working with an organization in Romania where they were actually having to say, we will cut off your access to information if we see that you've been working over a specified number of hours, simply from a health point of view. It's great, it's fantastic that we're finally talking about mental health inside the workplace. It's unfortunate that it had to be the pandemic that rose to this situation when we don't have easy access to people to help them, to engage them in that type of thing. So it's about these daily rest breaks. It's about what's the traditional remote working week number of hours. Managers have to start looking for signs of overwork. Is it the dialogue that we have with people? Is it ensuring that we have online access to company support mechanisms where people can engage and talk to people about some of the issues that they're facing? Remember, in a face-to-face work environment, I can go to my colleague next door. I can knock on his or her door and talk to them. Or as they're walking by my office, around the water cooler, whatever it is. In a remote working environment, as I think a lot of us have come to realize, it's lonely out there, okay? And it can feel rather strange. And you don't want to bother somebody else. You know that you could send them a quick email or engage with them on Skype. You say, you try and justify it. In a face-to-face environment, it's a lot easier to find a quick support care mechanism. Back to what I was saying before about these people who said, get me away from home. I want to be back in the work environment. What we've noticed is that a lot of those individuals, a lot of it is due to the mental aspects. It's the craziness of the kids. It's the craziness of my significant other, or all of these other crazy things that are happening at home. But a lot of it is to be back with like-minded people, to engage with them eye to eye, that face-to-face aspect of things. Fostering this environment of a psychological safety where people can speak up, ask for help without fear, and so on. Maybe these online personalized relationships. We've seen a little bit of gamification put forward not in a mandated way, let me reemphasize, but in an informal type of way, where we have this opportunity to engage, to have some fun, whatever it is in that online type of work environment. And that emotional support, especially to those new remote workers. And again, I can't overemphasize the importance of somebody's immediate manager. For me, the most important person to anybody inside an organization is their immediate manager, one level up. That's it. That is the most important person to me. If I engage with anybody, if I trust anybody, it's that person. So there's got to be that type of linkage, because a manager communicates stress and helplessness. Right? If he or she doesn't impact effectively that remote work environment, you can look at the work on people by people like Goleman, talking about emotional intelligence, that important of the managerial communication, that managerial stress release that comes from that immediate manager, one level up. Assisting remote workers in managing competing work and life priorities. One of the things, as I said before, that people have been looking for is that work-life balance. Well, here's that opportunity now. I'm at home. I can create that work-life balance, but now I've got to look at things like the behavioral side, the cognitive side, the temporal side, and so on. For example, not everybody's optimal work times are the same in a home environment. I have children, and for a while now, the kids have been in a remote teaching environment. Well, my ability to work is mitigated by them depending on their start and stop times and the times that they have break or lunch and so on. That impacts my ability. So finding those balancing acts, knowing that somebody is not available during certain times. What I've been telling managers the last little while is, for each of your employees, take notes, take specific notes about the things that they're doing, the remote workers, and when they're busiest, when they're not busiest, and show that you're engaging with them, show them that you're understanding some of the things that are happening, and that you're not just going through the motions again. And again, this is something that has changed from the first time that people went remote until now. Let me just conclude my discussion with you, and I apologize for this type of monologue, but I definitely want to engage with you in about 7 minutes, I think, would be my guess here. I want to just share some best practices with you. This came from a workshop, a focus group workshop that we had with around 30 managers, senior managers, directors from across the region, in terms of ways to engage with remote workers during this pandemic and going forward. First of all, sharing calendars, okay, to facilitate one-on-one and team meetings. A lot of times there's just this make it happen then. Okay? You can't force these things to happen. A manager should be looking at everybody's calendars, seeing when the best times are, and then trying to do that. Creating virtual stand-up meetings to foster routine and commonality. Conversations by weekly chats. Okay, optional though. Okay, again, a lot of the things that we're going to see here, what directors told us were the best ways to approach this is in an optional perspective, from an optional perspective. And people, again, remote workers, when they see the word optional, they don't think, oh, it must be mandatory. No. Optional truly has to mean optional. Okay. Yes, you can record them. Yes, you can do other things and so on. Open online rooms where people can go and virtually be there. Virtual whiteboards, for example, are a good opportunity for people to doodle, to say things, to engage with people. One of the things that I liked that came up was a very large organization actually had what they called the up nights. Okay? These were meetings held on a monthly basis to talk about what was not working. okay? Oh, and by the way, they had the We Won meetings on a quarterly basis. Okay? They were having more problems than they were wins, okay? Let's just put it that way. But these are opportunities for people to just vent, okay? To really get it out of their systems. What we know from a mental health perspective is the more you're not able to get your opinions out, the more you sort of sit and hold it in, and the more you're not with people, the more it festers, and the more it has an impact on your mental health. Again, the impact of that direct manager is absolutely critical, absolutely critical. Given the peculiarity of remote work, empathy for managers is paramount, okay? You've got to be aware, okay? Compassionate understanding, again, that's why I'm always suggesting write down notes, take notes. No, for example, you're in an online meeting and somebody says, sorry guys, I've got to go and my mother-in-law has to go to the dentist. I've got to take my mother-in-law because she's too old and she's got to be protected. What's the first thing you can do as a manager when you get back into an online environment? How did everything go with your mother-in-law? Everything good, everything cool. Simple ways to create empathy. And it doesn't have to be fake. Let's be honest. What do I want from my boss in terms of empathy? I want him to understand me. I want him to show interest in me. These types of environments make it very easy for us. Around my computer, for example, I have a bunch of sticky notes, okay? I have them on my computer. When I'm engaging with somebody, I have little sticky notes and I say, okay, remind this person about that. Don't forget to ask him or her about this. These are the important things to him or her. So I don't even have to remember it. I don't have to flip through notes and find things. I've got it here, and it creates that engagement aspect of things. The culture of the organization. Perhaps now is the opportunity to rethink some of the cultural definitions that we have, the way we do business around here, the way we identify good performance versus bad performance. Remote work should be defined as well by compliance as expected by labor laws, quality standards. For example, there are a lot of labor laws and so on related to the work environment, the standards of the work environment. Are we ensuring that that's happening in our remote work environments with our people to ensure that they're getting the same quality, they're protected the same way they would as if they were in our own work environment? I mentioned it before, and I'll mention it again. Remote workers crave recognition. You've got to give them recognition. Yeah, some have given gifts, some acknowledge teams. Put it on a whiteboard in a virtual room. Send it out as a blank message to everybody. Talk with the remote worker one-on-one. When you're in a room environment, acknowledge what people have been doing. And maybe don't acknowledge situations where people go above and beyond in a remote work environment. Remember a situation where a remote worker went over to another remote worker's house to help them with something because they just couldn't figure it out. They weren't able to work it out in a remote work environment. The guy said, I'm coming to your house. Went to his house, helped them out. What did the guy do the next time he got into a remote work environment? He said, I just want to thank, fill in the name, for really going above and beyond and helping me out. He didn't need to do that, but he did. Use those types of opportunities. It feels good. We knew that in a work environment. We already knew that. But in a remote work environment, uplift again. Bring it forward even more. Flexibility. Give people as much flexibility as you can. They will reward your organization back. Decentralization in a remote work environment is the name of the game. If you have a centralized work structure, if you're heavy on the bureaucracy, if you're heavy on the hierarchy, you got to change it around a little bit. Now, look, I understand. What can we say about bureaucracies, okay? Bureaucracy will be the last thing left on planet Earth the day, and let's hope that the earth doesn't end for a very, very long period of time. But bureaucracy will lock the door when we're done here on planet Earth. Okay, it's the last thing that will go. Reduce the bureaucracies. Don't make us be frustrated in a work environment. In a face-to-face environment, if I'm frustrated, I'll come and I'll pound on your door. I'll walk the halls. I'll get some other people together. In a remote work environment, I'm looking around the room. I'm hitting the wall with my fist. Give us those opportunities to make those decisions. Empower people within reason, of course. Create digital signatures, create digital approvals, all of these ways where we can do it faster, because in a remote work environment, I can work quicker, faster, more productively. I expect the system behind me to also do that. Finally, this impact of the potential negativity that comes from, especially, I'll put this on the table, working mothers who are forced into remote or hybrid work environments. Let's start looking at it from a positive standpoint. We can be productive at home. We can do 2 or 3 things at the same time. Find those opportunities within your culture, within those work environments, to create the opportunities for people to feel as engaged as if they were in the face-to-face environment, with all the flexibilities. I'll bring it back again. Autonomy, mastery, purpose. Remember, when we do these things, productivity goes up, absenteeism goes down, turnover goes down, job satisfaction goes up, loyalty goes up. When we do it properly, when we engage in the digital environment in an effective way. The bottom line is that we're seeing a new breed of people in organizations. We need to understand it. We need to embrace it. We need to bring it along with the Generation Z and how they're flowing into our system. The Zs are coming, ladies and gentlemen. The millennials are jumping on board. Let's run with it. Let's embrace it. Let's use this digital environment, this engagement with digital workers to the good of our organizations, and get away from putting all these rules and restrictions on them again. Thank you very much for the opportunity to engage with you, to talk to you. I said 7 minutes from my last checkpoint, and it looks like it was just around 7 minutes. I appreciate the opportunity to provide to you some information, some knowledge, some expertise from some of the things that we're doing, and I look forward to some discussion with you now and some engagement with you after we're done here as well. So thank you very much. And let me just grab my Christmas cup and just take a little drink. Merry Christmas to everybody. Or happy holidays.
Have a short break. Thank you for amazing guidelines you put throughout your presentation. This is very interesting to hear. And I think that you tackled really important issues when it comes to digital environment. Hence, we have a couple of questions that we can address right now if you want to, because we have enough time. So I'll read questions to you so that you can give the answers. The first one was employee productivity. In an effort to track employee productivity when they're working online and maintaining the trust, the companies often choose the wrong methods. How to find a good balance to achieve both?
Very, very good question. And so the first response to a question like that is it's very much organizationally driven. Okay? It very much depends on the organization, and it depends on the type of work that's getting done. Okay, to put it in context to begin with. My view on this is the following. From a performance standpoint, look, every year we set KPIs. Okay, we set these key performance indicators. So key performance indicators are a good starting point for performance. If you want to bring these two together, there's something called the results-oriented work environment. And the results-oriented work environment, sometimes called the ROWE, R-O-W-E, is an environment whereby we set people their tasks, their goals, and then they perform them. They get them done wherever they want, however they want. They just got to get their work done. that shows people a level of trust. Now, at the same time, if they're not getting it done, then we have to take action on it. Absolutely. But in a results-oriented work environment, what all the research shows is that when people are given their goals and they're given the freedom and the flexibility, the trust to get them done, they tend to outperform those goals. They tend to go above and beyond because it's a way of showing the organization that the trust that they were given was well placed. It was well founded. Because if I'm in my work environment and I don't meet my goals, I got nobody else to blame. There's nobody here but me. If I'm in a work environment, I'm going to say, Darko, he's such a pain in the butt. Okay, Darko keeps, and I know I want to perform, but Darko keeps putting more work on me, and this and that. You provide those opportunities for the types of jobs that can be done. What the results have shown is that people work faster, and they tend to work more than our expectations are in those types of work environments. So, Rosita, I think that would be my advice or suggestions for what you're suggesting there, or for what your question is.
Thank you. The next question refers to autonomy. How realistic it is for big corporations to provide autonomy?
Sorry, Alexander. Can I just stop you for 1 second? I think Alexander just unmuted her microphone. Maybe she'd like to say something, or we can talk just a little bit more about that before we go to Tamara's question.
Sorry, can you repeat? My internet froze for a second.
Sorry. Rosita, if you want to ask a question, go ahead, and then, if that answered your question, just give us a thumbs up so we can go to the next one. Maybe that's the best way of doing it.
This is a great answer. Okay, can we move on to the second question, or is it okay? Okay.
All right.
The second question refers to autonomy in organizations. How realistic it is for big corporations to provide autonomy, and if so, to which extent can autonomy be provided if we know the complexity of such hierarchical systems? Sorry.
Well, Tamara, there's your $1 million question.
Yeah.
How far is an organization willing to go? Here's my response to the big companies that say, you can't do that. Guys, we just proved that you could. Okay? Sorry, with all due respect, every damn big company on planet Earth was showing autonomy to workers, from the Facebooks of the world to the IBMs to the Philip Morrises of the world, to the Japan Tobaccos, to the all of them have shown that they can get work done in that environment. So what I always like to tell companies is, whenever you want to try something, it's good to do a test run. See if it works out or not. Guys, we did a full-scale test run, and it worked. It worked in some ways it didn't. So the one thing that bigger organizations have is the ability to reframe what they're doing. Okay, some smaller companies, it's a little bit more challenging. For the bigger companies, because there are the hierarchies in place, you have these frontline supervisors, middle-level supervisors that can be there monitoring it. So, in my view, what we need to do is we need to change some of the KPIs of frontline managers or direct supervisors, where their ability to monitor autonomy, to measure, to look at those KPIs, to look at those performance indicators, and be a part of the solution rather than a part of the problem, I think will go a long way. A lot of organizations are now saying, I'll give you another situation. I'm working with a very, very large medical company right now, one of the top 5 globally. And they've said, we want to be fit to restart the business after the pandemic. What do we need to do? And we're rethinking all of their systems, all of their strategies. And a big part of this is autonomy, both in a remote work environment and in a hybrid work environment. How can they build the autonomy aspect into it? It's a challenge because their culture was not built that way. Okay, it was not built around autonomy. It was built around bureaucracy and hierarchy and sign-off. Now they're saying, this is our opportunity to rethink. Arguably, we have another, and I hate to say this, but arguably, I'm guessing another 1.5 to 2 years before we're in a position where we can say, okay, we're normal, whatever new normal is. This is the opportunity to rethink those things. So, Tamara, that would be my advice on that type of question to people in big companies.
Thank you, Leslie. I just saw the message from Ružica. She's at the workplace. Unfortunately, she cannot unmute, but thank you, Ružica, for sending your questions. We hope you get the answer. Now let's go back a little bit to talking about remote managers that you mentioned throughout your presentation. Any advice on retooling the skill set we need for managing remote workplace? Which skills are essential in this moment?
I would argue that the most critical skills is now something that and it's a new term that we've come up, which is digital empathy. We talk, look, for some managers, it's still empathy. Okay, let's be clear. We still haven't finalized that, but now we're talking about digital empathy. This ability to be empathetic in this faceless type of environment that we have. You know, and I think we've got to re-emphasize that. I think we have to start looking when we're looking at promotion opportunities, when we're looking for people in managerial positions, to identify those that can work both in a remote or hybrid type of work environment. You know, it's not, I hate to say it, the traditional dinosaur person that we have inside our organization that is going to work well in these remote work environments. There's still this stigma that comes with older people, with older managers that say, if I can't see them, I can't trust them. If I can't see them, I really can't be sure that they're working. Even if you see the data, okay? Even if you see the data, they say, oh, they're breaking rules. I think we need to see a very different set of tools and skills. And it starts, quite honestly, at the high school level. It then pervades through the university system. How do we create those skills? And then into MBA programs and so on going forward. So it's not a real easy fix. You know, I think I was working with a big telecoms company the other day, doing a train the trainers presentation on digital and remote engagement. And I think these are some of the things when organizations start to identify that there needs to be a change in that way, then we start to see things rolling.
That's a great point you made there. We have a couple of more questions in my private chat. Just give me a second to open them. For all the audience, you can also, of course, send your questions in the public chat. Okay, so what is the next phase that organizations will go in? What is it that HR needs to understand in order to follow this trend?
Okay, now I got to be careful because I know I'm talking to HR people. Okay, let me be right up front about it, and I have no problems backing this up, and if you want to throw virtual daggers at me, go ahead, okay? The first thing HR needs to do is to understand what remote work is and the work that people are doing. One of my big pet peeves about human resource management departments in general, and not you guys, it's all the other people who didn't come to the seminar that I worry about. It's that they don't really understand the work that people are doing and the type of work that's done inside the organization. I think what HR needs to do is get a good handle on the work that people do, what they bring to the organization, the skill sets that they have, and how that translates into a remote work environment. I think that is something where HR can provide high value add. And the other thing that I want to say here is I think this is also an excellent opportunity for HR to really show to not only itself, but every damn work in the organization that HR has a role to play. And it's because of this new work environment, it's because of the hybrid systems, where if we get out front we can win the game from HR, and people will actually turn to us and start asking us for advice. The last thing you want is the IT people to be out in front of us, okay? And I've seen this in some organizations where it's the IT people that are running out in front saying, hey, we understand remote work because it's IT oriented. No, they don't. They understand the backbone of it. They don't understand the people side of it. And I think that's where HR, and I think you're going to start seeing professional HR positions related to this interface between the people side and the technology side. So I think it's an amazing new world for HR to get out front and to be really showing organizations value add in this new world of remote work.
Okay, I can see that in the next question we're going to tackle generational differences. Are there any radical differences between younger and older generations when it comes to the digital workplace in terms of expectations, motivation, and engagement?
100, and I'd never use the term 101%, so I'm just going to say 100%. There are big differences between the generation when it comes to this. Look, here's what I like to say. Generation Z likes to, okay, millennials consider my generation to be dinosaurs, okay? But millennials, you're very funny people. Generation Z considers millennials dinosaurs, okay? And they consider my generation to be a fossil, okay? So there are big generational gaps inside organizations. I do and I'd be happy to do this maybe for the association at some point. I do a big presentation specifically on the generational differences between millennials and Zs. But let me just put this out there as a teaser, but also to answer the question. Millennials are much more collaborative types of individuals. They like to collaborate. They like to work in groups, whereas Zs are very much more independently oriented. They're much more independently driven. They're more entrepreneurial in the types of things that they do. There are differences. And if there's one generation that is more attuned to working in a remote environment, it will be the Zs, okay? The millennials, I would argue, at best, they're hybrid. They're not really looking forward. They don't really look forward more to be remote workers. It's not that they can't do it, and it's not that they don't have the skills, but they like those collaborative environments. They like coming together. And then as you go up the food chain, as you go up the age chain, you have people that are a little bit less pure remote work environment and more either collaborative or they want to be there face to face. Okay. So yeah, there are big differences, and it's honestly it's a 1 hour presentation, so hour and a half presentation on big generational differences inside our organizations and how to take advantage of those generational gaps.
Thank you. We spoke about trust a little bit earlier, but we have a similar question. How to establish trust within organizations? So the previous question was how to find a balance between trusting employees and checking the productivity. Let's see a little bit about how to establish trust in this remote working environment.
Sure. So first of all, let's put it out on the table. Trust is not something you can demand from anybody. I can't say to you, Alexandra, trust me, and you will. Okay? I have to prove it to you. I have to demonstrate trust to you. So in a remote working environment, you know, it's really one of the ways to start establishing trust is to do what you say you are going to do. We have the opportunity, you know, we have digital records of things, okay? You know, you said in one of our group chats that you were going to do this and then you didn't do it, okay? And the thing is, because everything gets recorded today as well, I can go back through through presentations or meetings and say, that's when she said that, and that's when he said that. Simply do what you promised to do. And if you can't do it, explain why you can't. That also establishes trust. There's sometimes this view where, well, I promised that, but I couldn't do it. So therefore I didn't say anything to you. You know what? Sometimes you got to state the obvious. Sometimes you got to come back and just say, you know what, guys, 3 weeks ago, I promised to do that for you. Here's the new reality. Okay. Here's my new reality. I'm still trying my best, but that's where I am at this point. The other thing, other great ways to establish trust, providing feedback on things. Feedback is a great way to show trust or to show that engagement. And I would argue that the next way, and I'll just put this into the chat room here, is something that we're spending more time working with organizations on. It's something called feed forward. But feedback looks back in time. It tells me historical aspects of things. So I can engage trust with you in terms of feedback. But I can also do it in terms of feed forward, which is say what I'm going to do for you in the future, where I see things happening, and then showing you as we get to it that you can trust me on it. So I think it's a both feedback, but as well the feed forward side of things. And I'd be more than happy to if anybody's interested, to share an article that we've just written on feed forward as a way of engaging with people and something that can be used as a tool in terms of workers today, both in the hybrid, face-to-face, and remote environments.
Thank you, Leslie. Since that was our last question, I suggest we finish this masterclass strong with key takeaways from your masterclass you want to emphasize for all the audience here and all the people who will be listening to this later. And of course, any literature you can suggest related to articles or books on the topic of digital workplaces.
Mm-hmm. One of the things here I would say, so first takeaway, don't assume anything. Okay, I will use that until the day that I finish talking to people. Don't assume anything about remote workers. You've got to make sure. So don't assume. You make an ass out of you and me. Absolutely. Secondly, get ready to, from an HR perspective, to engage with the remote workers. Get ready for the new era of HR. Get ready to add value add to managers, to frontline supervisors, to employees in this new remote work environment. It's the opportunity for us to rewrite human resource management. And most importantly, in our own way, in our own language, and not be catching up to somebody else. I think new HR is here. And this is the greatest opportunity we've ever had to reset human resource management inside organizations. And finally, I would say a lot of empathy towards people in that remote work environment, whether they choose to be there or they don't choose to be there, i.e. we force people into it. Find those new ways of creating that empathetic environment in this digital world. For me, social media is actually the word social and social in the term social media is a misnomer. It is not a social device. It is an independent device. It's an independent technology. It's not a social technology. Empathy is a social activity. Use that empathy inside that social environment, inside that social network, and create that new way of connecting with people. When we talk to remote workers, they say, I want to feel like I'm face to face, but I want all of the independence, the autonomy, the mastery, the purpose that comes along with it. Here's our opportunity to reframe that for those workers.
Thank you, Leslie, for the journey you provided us with in the previous hour and a half, where we started off strong with talking about how did we get here to the remote we are living today, and all the guidelines you provided for managerial behaviors, remote managers, engagement, trust, and maybe the most important, healthy climate in the work environment. Of course, it was amazing to hear the best practices as the most important takeaways for all the HRs who are listening to this. So thank you. It was amazing. And thank you to the audience. Of course, I will repeat just Leslie's note from the beginning of the masterclass. If you have additional questions, feel free to chat with Leslie and, of course, connect on LinkedIn if it's okay.
Absolutely. More than happy to engage. I come up through Serbia quite often, and throughout the region, I'm continually on the go. So more than happy to engage remotely, but as well, maybe in some face-to-face way as well. And as I said, I will forward on the materials to Alexandra and the association. So if anybody wants it, you're more than welcome to have that information. Happy to help out.
Yeah, please send us all the materials. We'll send them to our members through Slack communities that we have. So thank you once again. A great masterclass indeed. And thank you for your time and your presentation.
Great.
It was great.
Thanks a lot. Great to see everybody. Thanks a lot for your engagement.
Yep. Enjoy the day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.